This is Carrie and Summer with the Say My Name podcast that gives a voice to women's stories. It's my story, it's your story, it's our stories of pain and healing.
Betrayal doesn't begin to describe the knife that I pull out of my side. So I'ma put the past behind me, 'cause I got strength inside me, and a strength that I wanna share with you.
This is episode 2, Summer's Story. Summer's story of anxiety, depression, rape, bulimia, anorexia, divorce, loss, and healing is a powerful manifestation of all that you can achieve when you connect with your higher self and take a risk on you.
Hi, Summer.
Hi.
I am so glad I get to interview you right now.
I know, it's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. The whole point of it is to be able to let people know why we're so passionate about doing this podcast is because we have our own stories.
Right.
I want to honor you right
Thank
now.
you.
Shit, I'm going to cry.
I'm already tearing up. I can't help it. I'm sorry.
I mean, we've talked in depth a lot about it, and it's moved me to my ultimate core. And I'm so excited to be able to interview you right now and be able to have others be able to experience your story and be able to know what you've gone through and be able to see the insane amount of growth and healing that you've experienced from it.
I think it's important to start with some backstories, with some information about how I grew up and how I was raised, because that impacts us and our inner child, and what she needs or he needs impacts what we do right now and the decisions that we make and how we heal ourselves and how we feed ourselves. I grew up in a single parent home. I had an older brother and an older sister, but they were significantly older than me. So it was as if I was a only child. And I knew that my mom really counted on me. She really felt like what I did made an impact on her. So I always grew up with a feeling of intense responsibility, that whatever I did, whatever I said, how I performed, how I achieved, made a big difference in her life, almost as if I was responsible for the way that she felt. That didn't go well with the personality that I was born with either, which is a perfectionist and a people pleaser and pretty empathic. And so I felt a lot of weight on my shoulders, even as a kid, that what I did and what I said and even the preferences that I had made a difference to her. I felt enmeshed with my mom, but at the same time, I felt abandoned because I felt like she never recognized what I needed. There wasn't anyone to give me the things that I needed so much as a child. I did have a really strong relationship with my grandparents and with my cousins. I spent a lot of time on my grandparents' ranch, and that really fed me. And that made me a big part of who I am, because I was able to tap into the imaginative part of myself and be very creative and who I really was with my cousins and with my grandparents. I felt torn between being who I really was and a responsibility to her. Sometimes I almost felt like I lived 2 lives as a child. I got older and I was a senior in high school. Things really started to fall apart for me. I somehow came to a place where I couldn't get out of bed anymore. I know that was really disturbing and upsetting to my mom. I was really religious. I was searching for something to give meaning to my life. I felt alone, so I was very Mormon, and I felt like that was an added pressure to conform and to be perfect. It all started crumbling down. I couldn't get out of bed. No matter how much my mom wanted me to, no matter how much she yelled at me, no matter how much she asked me to or cried about it, I could not physically get out of bed. It's not that I didn't want to go back to school. I had straight A's. I was on track to be valedictorian. I just could not do it. That was my breaking point, and I started to see a counselor. I started to see a clinical psychologist, and then I moved out of my mom's house when I was still 17, before I had actually graduated.
How did you feel about yourself during that time?
I felt like I was in survival mode. And in order to survive, I had to escape. And I didn't know where else to go or what else to do, other than I knew I needed to get out of those walls and that home. So I moved in with my cousins, a place where I'd always felt like there was more freedom. There was so much activity there. There were 7 children in their home. I was diagnosed with all these crazy things because no one really knew what was going on.
Like
I was diagnosed with like bipolar disorder, with manic depression, all of these things that
Wow.
were absolutely not me.
Yeah, and I know you right now, so it's like, what?
Yeah.
What?
But it was something where I would describe how I was feeling and someone would jump to a diagnosis and then give me some pills. That's when I simultaneously started to get better and worse. So there was a time where I started to do some self-harm. I started cutting, not a lot, but I felt numb and I wanted to feel something. And pain was okay. That was enough. If I could feel some pain, I felt like I was still around, I was still alive. There was relief. As I started to get better and recover, as I went through counseling, then I stopped that immediately. And it was pretty short-lived. I never really talked about it with anybody until years and years later. I left for college. So I went to Utah State University. I had been abroad. I had been to Cambridge University for a while and studied philosophy there. And in England, and I had come back. And I was just recently back when I joined a sorority and there was a dance. One of my sorority sisters she was dating a guy who had a brother who didn't have a date, and he had hung around the sorority quite a bit. So we knew him a little, and I knew him a little. And so she encouraged me to ask him to this dance. So I did. That night we went to the dance together, and he made some comments about messing around after the dance. And I made it really clear that I just didn't do that. That's not what I did. And that I hardly knew him, and I wasn't comfortable with that.
Right.
I remember him making an excuse about going back to his dorm room that night after the dance. And so I went with him. I was raped. He raped me that night.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, this can't be happening. And I remember screaming no, and I remember trying to get away. And then I remember going numb, like leaving my body in a way and not even really associating my mind with my body at one point. And then after it was over, I got up like I was in a trance and gathered up my clothes and put them on and walked out the door like I was a zombie. It was the strangest feeling. And he was preoccupied doing something else. It was done. It was over. He didn't care. And I knew that moment my life was forever changed. The first thing I did was go to my old roommate's apartment and tell her what happened. And she told me to go directly to the resident associate or resident assistant.
Thank God you did that.
Yeah. I didn't know what else to do. I had to tell somebody. I knew it was wrong.
But a lot of women don't do that.
There was a lot of shame, believe me. There was a lot of shame. And there have been thousands and thousands of moments where I've picked apart that night and thought to myself, is there a moment that I made a mistake? Is there a moment where I should have done something different? Could I have changed the outcome? Did I do anything wrong?
Did you ever feel like it was your fault?
No, I never felt like it was my fault. But I always picked apart that whole night thinking, what if there was a moment where I could have gotten away? So I didn't feel like it was my fault getting into the situation, but while it was happening, I picked apart that event. Because you hear stories of women fighting and running away and, being heroic in these moments. But you don't hear stories of heroism of women that go numb and leave their bodies.
Right.
You don't hear about that. That's what happened to me. And I felt I had no choice. I felt I felt like garbage. I felt like I was being used. I was garbage. So you don't hear about women talking about that.
Yeah.
I felt like maybe I had done something wrong. Or maybe at some point I could have changed it. When I went to the resident assistant, he knew exactly who I was talking about because he had heard a similar story from other women. And he said, we need to go to the police right now. And we did. When all was said and done, we had found out that he had raped 7 other women before me. So I was the last one. And he was arrested. And I met all these other women throughout the next year of my life and went through pre-trial, which is just as horrendous as you would expect, just as horrendous as you see on TV, where the attorney picks you apart and tries to go through your sexual history and tries to accuse you of baiting this other person and leading them on, as if that had anything to do with it. I know that some women had reported assault, but not rape.
Right.
And then other women started to come forward after I'd reported it.
Okay.
Other women had experienced rape. They had not reported it until I did. Are there other women out there that he did the same thing to? I'm sure.
Right.
That was probably the last time I said the word rape, if I ever did.
Right.
I explained what happened.
Right.
But the word rape is so painful
Mm-hmm.
that it probably was 20 years before I said that word again, because it hurts so much. I would use the word sexual assault.
Right. That feels...
It doesn't feel
That feels
as
softer.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
doesn't feel as violent, and it feels softer. So if I needed to explain or I needed to talk about it, I would use the word sexual assault. So it hurt to talk about it, hurt to think about it. Even though I'd been to counseling after the fact, the counseling focused more on what was going on in my life afterwards and how I was dealing with that and how to function in normal society. We did not go over what happened. I did not talk about the feelings that I had when it was happening. I did not reveal all of those moments that I tore apart about that night. I was able to be functional after, a few years after that.
Mm-hmm.
It really did take me years to get to the point where I could get up in the morning, go to a job or go to school all day, come home and live my life. I was just broken, and I felt like I didn't know if I could be healed again. I didn't know if I could be a whole person again. So immediately after that was when my eating disorder started. Yeah. I started pushing down those feelings with food. I wanted to stuff them. I wanted to numb every part of myself, and numbing them with food was the easiest way to do it. And then throwing up that food because I couldn't feel those emotions. It was impossible for me. It felt like death. I used to have nightmares about eating something and not being able to throw it up.
Right.
Which is a metaphor for feeling something.
Right. You just use the words of stuffing down. And that was something that you were doing with all of your emotions from the experience with the rape. Yeah. And you could only keep it down for so long. And then what happens? You need to purge it. You need to throw it up.
It's the next logical step of feeling something so painful.
Right.
And just wanting to get rid of it. And there's an additional addiction that is control. So you feel so out of control. Your life is out of control. You feel like garbage. You don't feel bad about treating yourself like garbage.
Right.
Because you feel worthless. You know you're just crap. You know you're shit, and you are totally fine treating yourself like that with like shit.
You absolutely do not feel worthy.
No. So I can't control anything in my life. Someone has completely taken every part of control out of my life, has done whatever they wanted with me and thrown me away. Then that's something. If I can control my weight, if I can control my body, then that's something. And what goes along with bulimia, of course, is anorexia, which you restrict.
Right.
So it's another part of control. So if I could control these few things in my life, maybe I could continue on with living. Maybe I could feel like I had a handle on something.
It'll feel safe. When you are taken to that level of that type of sexual assault, you absolutely, to the extreme, do not feel safe.
Right.
And that's going to do something to you in your subconscious and something deep within your soul. So how did you get there? How did you get to a point where you realize, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't good for me. This doesn't make me happy.
I was deep in that eating disorder for years, close to 10 years.
Wow.
I knew that I didn't want to anymore. I knew it. It is ironic because you feel a tremendous amount of shame.
Right.
So you know you're not supposed to be doing it. But it is a drug because you could become addicted to that control.
Yes.
And that feeling of being able to take all those emotions away. It's such a relief. And then immediately after, you feel shame.
Right.
Which makes you want to do it again.
Yeah.
So it is a vicious cycle. So during my pregnancies, I knew there was something else that I needed to take care of. But then after, I would just start right up again. When I look back on it, I think, how in the world did people not notice the signs? And maybe some people did, but the people closest to me didn't. At what point did I finally feel like I didn't need this anymore. When I started to feel like I was worthwhile on the inside and this was a habit. So I had done so much internal work that I started to understand that I was worthwhile, and this was not something that I can continue to do if I loved myself, and I was starting to love myself. I started to read, I started to meditate, and those feelings that I had when I did those things, especially meditation, were huge. I could feel my higher self. I could feel my soul. I could feel source. I knew that there was a greater purpose for me. I knew this was something that I didn't need anymore. It was a coping strategy for me, but I was better than this. I needed to overcome this to be a better version of myself, to be the full version of myself, really. Not a better version,
Right.
but to really come into the fullness of who I was. Because this was holding me back. The shame was holding me back. Even though it was a way to escape, per se, I needed to let go so that I could come into the fullness of who I was. And I started to understand that I was worthy of something more. So when I took the risk of doing something different, believing something different about myself, believing that I was worthy of spending time on, if I could take those 20 minutes and meditate, if I could take that time and write in my journal, if I could take that time and just sit with the emotions that I was feeling, then they would pass and I could start to feel connected to my source again. But when I binged and purged, the feelings were still there. I just pushed pause on them and felt them again another day. So if I could think, okay, what emotion is making me want to do this? Is it that I feel overwhelmed? Is it that I feel not recognized? Do I feel alone, or do I feel overwhelmed and I want to be alone? What is it that's happening here? And once I started to really look for that and sit with it and meditate, it would pass and I could be back into myself again.
Right.
Because
Wow.
it is almost like you're outside of yourself when you're doing it.
Yeah.
You're like,
It's
and
like
an
an alien has taken over your body.
I need to check out. And so I'm going to do this
Yeah.
because it makes it easy for me to check out. I don't want to feel these feelings. It's too much. No matter what feeling it was, it pushed me over the edge because I was already like trying to push down a bunch of feelings and block a bunch of feelings. So I think really taking the risk on myself and learning that, like, okay, I'm worth this. I'm worth taking a risk on. I can take a risk of not doing this mean thing to myself
Right.
anymore.
I absolutely love listening to your side of it because it's so different than mine. I love it.
I can't wait to hear yours
I
too.
know. I love it because there's women that are going to resonate with your side of the story. And it took me a long time to realize that I had some emotions that I needed to feel. And you were starting to recognize it very quickly. So I love
I don't know,
to
10
see.
years isn't very quickly.
True. Well, you know what though? There's some women that go a lot longer.
Yeah, it's true.
So, I mean, it's all relative. 1 year is hell.
Yeah.
So
Oh, for sure.
It just 1 year, 40 years, 50 years, it just doesn't matter.
So when I started to take a risk on myself, I purposefully looked for things in my life that were difficult that I did. Giving birth, breastfeeding.
Yeah. And you've had 4 babies, right?
And I've had 4 babies.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. And I had 3 at home. So those are vivid memories.
Love that. I didn't realize it was 3.
Yeah. I had 3 at home.
That's amazing.
So those memories of pushing those babies out by myself
Yeah. Fucking
were
empowering.
tremendous. And things like running a half marathon, or, couldn't even run up a flight of stairs when I started running. But a friend of mine said, all you have to do is run for 1 minute, and then walk for 2 minutes. Run for a minute, walk for 2 minutes. And I was like, well, I can do that. Well, once I did that, then maybe I could run for 2 minutes and walk for a minute. So as I started to do that, I started to gain a sense of self. I purposefully looked back on my life and looked at things that I did that were hard. And I tried to take inventory of those things, because I can easily put things in my file folder in my mind of like, wow, you're shitty. And you did this shitty thing, and you failed at this, and you suck at this, and you could do this way better than you're doing it right now. And you should probably have everybody eat organic. I mean, all these things that just pile up. I knew that I needed to purposefully look for things and put them in my mind in order to gain momentum. Once I started taking the risk on myself, then even just one day would pass and I was like, I did not. Oh my God, I did it.
That's huge.
I did it one day.
Huge.
I was like, oh my God, I've gone 2 days. So things like that kept happening. And if I did make a mistake, you know, I tried so hard not to let that ruin everything. It's a recovery story is what it is. But I did not tell anybody, not one person in the entire universe, that I had this problem, or that I had, even when it was over, when I was done struggling, I had recovered. I did not tell one single person until I started working out with you.
What?
Yeah, I didn't tell
did
anybody.
Not know this.
No one knew.
What?
So we started working out together.
Oh my God, I love hearing this.
I started getting stronger, and I started looking at the weights that I was lifting. And then as we recorded them throughout time, I could look back and say, wow, a month ago, I was only lifting this much weight, and now I'm lifting this much weight. Holy shit, oh my God, I'm amazing. I am amazing.
You are.
And I would go home.
You're fucking strong.
I would go home and be like, hey, guess what I lifted today? Rick, how about that?
He's like,
how about them apples? And he's like, wow, good job, sweetheart. I don't even, okay, yeah, that's awesome. And I'd be like, so how much do you bench press? He's like, I don't know, 295. And I'm like, you know what? Shut the fuck up right now.
Screw you.
Yeah. So anyway, on top of that, the group of women that are in there with me, and they're motivating and they're kind and they're encouraging. And then you were talking about your story. And I was like, what the fuck? She's talking about this? Like, this is a horrible secret in my life. This is shame.
which, by the way, I already knew you had an eating disorder.
Oh, shit.
The thing is that somebody who has had an eating disorder, we read between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
So you can very clearly see, because you've been there, you've done it.
Yeah.
So you just use certain words, and I knew you were trying to kind of soften it.
Yeah.
So I didn't know to what level, but I knew you had some type of an eating disorder. It was just a matter of what. Was it anorexia? Was it bulimia?
Right.
Was it binge eating? I didn't know to that detail, but I knew with just the verbiage that you were using, I could tell it was a lot for you to say it. So I didn't push it because I knew it was intense for you to just say the words that you said, but I read between the lines.
I think
and
I
could
said
see
something
it.
like,
I struggled.
Yeah,
I've struggled with food,
similar
or
things
I've struggled
as well.
with eating issues, or whatever you use.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you used very specific words. Like I said, I can read between the lines, so I knew it. So that's why I'm so shocked. I had no idea that you had never told anybody.
No one.
Because I just thought, okay, she's just trying. It's scary to talk about it openly to anyone. Mm-hmm. But I assumed until just now that you had told your husband. And so, wow.
No way.
Oh, that's so amazing.
The shame around it was so thick. I didn't want anyone to know. Even though it had been years and years and years since I had struggled with it, I did not want anyone to know. It was so embarrassing. You started talking about it, and then one of my very best friends from Idaho came out to visit, and we were hiking, and I was like telling her about my workouts and how phenomenal they were. And I was like, you know what? Not only am I lifting weights, which is so cool, like I feel so strong, but like it's like a counseling session. It's like we're in group therapy. Everybody's so cool. And Carrie does this and Carrie says that. And then she says these things. And like, I think I have something I'm really scared to tell you. And I'm really scared, you know, but I really want to get it out. And I really want to tell you that I struggled with bulimia. And I was crying.
And you used the word.
And I did. I used the word.
Wow. So it took you 20 years to talk about, because you said that you had the eating disorder pretty quickly after the rape.
Yeah, right after.
So almost 20 years before you actually said the word.
Yeah. I was thinking she would think I was yucky and gross and disgusting and not worthy.
Your friend.
My friend.
Right.
And not a good person. Somehow, she would think I was not a good person.
Why did you tell her?
Because I was taking a risk. I knew I had to talk about it. I don't know. I had to let it out.
There's something in you.
that I
just
knew
needed
that I
to release
needed
it.
to heal in that way. It wasn't all the way done because I hadn't talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
I was over it, but I hadn't said anything about it. And that's what seals the deal.
Right.
Like I had to feel that fear.
You had to physically
Yeah, I
let
had
it
to say
out.
those words.
Yes.
I had to say it. I had to. There was so much power in saying it. And so when I said it, and we were both crying, and she was like, I cannot believe you thought that I would ever think anything of you but immense admiration and love and kinship. Like, how could you ever think that? And, you know, I just wasn't sure. And I mean, I knew you wouldn't, but I'm thinking these things about myself still sometimes. And it wasn't even that I thought she would think less of me. It's just that I had thought less of me for so many years. I almost felt like the world was reflecting that back to me. It wasn't that I didn't have confidence in her. It was just saying it out loud was like my final hurrah, you know, like, okay, world, okay, Summer, do you really love yourself? Can you say it out loud? Can you own it? And can you heal from this? And so once I did that, you know, it was just affirmation, confirmation to me that I could. So after I told her, I told my husband, which I was equally scared to do just because he's the closest person to me. And, you know, if he reacted poorly, then that would really suck. So, but of course he was so tender, so tender. That brought us, you know, so much closer than we'd ever had been because there was something between us.
Right.
Pretty soon after that happened, a major event happened in my life, which was when my very best friend was in a car accident, and she was really injured. She had a traumatic brain injury, very severe traumatic brain injury, and she lost her oldest son. I didn't hear from her that night, and I didn't understand why, and I kept texting her. And I was like, where are you? What's going on? Are you okay? Calling her, nothing. She had run over her phone with her car one time, and I didn't hear from her for a couple of days. And so I thought, maybe she ran over her phone. Yeah, maybe she lost her phone. I didn't know. I didn't know why she didn't show up or why we hadn't connected because we were supposed to go out. So the next day, I got a call, and it was from a friend of a friend, and they said, did you hear what happened to Jessica? And I said, what are you talking about? And they said she was in an accident, and they lost Grayson, which was her son. I immediately called her ex-husband, who they're very close, and they co-parented together, and he told me what had happened and told me she was in the ICU and that they had lost their oldest son, and it was absolutely devastating for me. Changed everything for me. As dark and as painful as those months following have been, that made me reach deeper inside myself to really get in touch with my source and my spirit and what my purpose is. Because it was just so devastating. I was so sad for her, and she was in a coma for 10 days. She couldn't speak. She couldn't speak for months. I mean, she was so severely injured. She almost died another time in the hospital. Oh, God, it was just unreal to watch someone that you love desperately. You don't know if they never will recover. So how do I help her deal with the loss of her son? And how do I help her deal with what's going on with her right now? How do I deal with that?
Yeah.
So just compounded pain, compounded issues and questions for the universe that I had. Like, what about my kids? In any moment, anything can change, and I don't know if it will or not. And how do I reconcile that with living every day like a normal person? When there's so much pain and so much suffering and so much uncertainty, how do I send my kids off to school? How do I drive in the car? How do I go to the store? How do I do anything without this intense fear of something happening in the next moment that I cannot predict? And I started to write about it, and I started to feel it, and I started to mourn again, a second time, a different time. And start to understand that I have my own creative powers, but that my higher self also has an agenda for me. I'm here to create amazing things, but I'm also here for a higher purpose. it's almost like two paths. Yeah, I can create awesome things, but I also have a purpose to tap into. Sometimes things happen that is more related to your higher purpose. I know that Grayson was here for the time that he needed to be here. I know that Jessica, my friend, has found a purpose in this pain that is so profound and so moving, that has resurrected her soul in ways that she could have never predicted before this happened. And she has clarity and perspective that is awe-inspiring. There is another path that we can connect to, but we may not be aware of in every moment of every day. Investing in Reiki, really committing to my meditation practice more, starting a yoga practice, and investing in myself and really trying to understand my purpose led me to the understanding that the words that I say are absolutely profound and I have to say them. And it was like this bolt of lightning for me.
Why do you have to say them?
Because there's no healing without saying them. Because the power that comes through these words is transcendent. Like, you transcend this physical realm by talking about your pain and your trauma and your journey. It is unbelievable. I've never felt such power and such healing as I do when I talk about my journey. And there are so many other little parts and little pieces that fit into my journey that, you know, clearly we can't go into in this podcast, that are so meaningful.
And don't you feel like each time you tell your story, it opens up another layer of the onion?
And you know what? It becomes beautiful instead
Sacred.
of shameful.
Sacred.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly look at my story, and some would look at it and go, oh my God, that's horrible, the things that you have experienced and things you've gone through. But I don't look at it that way.
Yeah.
I look at it as sacred.
There was a time in my life too where I made decisions about relationships, where I got into a marriage that was really destructive and emotionally abusive. You know, I look
Which
back
is not,
on,
it's not the marriage that you're
no,
in right
not
now.
the marriage
It's
I'm in now.
Yeah, right.
Marriage I'm in now is beautiful. Every step of the way, every moment is so amazing. So I was pregnant with my second baby, and my first was 2 years old when I was divorced, when my ex-husband left. And I was broken. And I remember calling my mom and being like, I can't do this. And she let me do that for a few weeks. And then she said, Summer, that's enough. You need to get up, you need to be with your babies, and you need to figure this out. Take care of your babies.
How old were your babies?
Well, I was pregnant with the one.
And you had a 2-year-old?
And then I had a 2-year-old.
Okay.
I realized, looking back on my old self, I had turned into a tiny, tiny mouse, was ruled by fear. But you've got to know that your higher self has got your back.
You're whole. It's just, you have to just see it for yourself.
I've had so many incredible people that have supported me along the way. And those have been blessings. I mean, those people, you know, I knew them before I came here. Our souls knew each other. And we knew what we were going to do for each other. And we came down here and we're like, I got you.
Totally, 100%. I have the same exact experiences as well. I know that, like, before you came here, it's like, okay, I got you, girl.
Yeah.
You're not going to like me very much, but I got you.
But I got you.
Yeah.
And you know what? The other person next to them is going to be, like, super shitty, but you've also contracted with them because you have to grow from that too. All of these combined experiences have made me so grateful for every moment. And I would not trade one moment.
You wouldn't, even in your darkest of times.
I wouldn't trade it.
To go back, you wouldn't change any part of it.
No.
Why?
Because I understand who I am. I understand my worth. I understand my purpose. And I understand I have so much to give.
What would be your advice that you would give somebody that resonates with your story? That maybe they are struggling with healing from rape, or bulimia, what would be your advice if they're experiencing it right now? They're in that dark tunnel. They're in that hell.
I would say you are worthy of the risk. Like, you are worth taking a risk on. You're worth it. Because I remember feeling, I can't risk it. I can't risk failing. I can't risk trying. It's just so hard. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I'll just stay in this pattern. It sucks and it hurts and it's shameful and I hate it. But it's so scary to do anything different.
What's the one step that you think is the best step, the first step to take?
Either writing it down or saying it out loud. But it's the first step.
Mm-hmm.
You have to put that pen to paper.
That is extremely helpful in starting that process of releasing the emotion that's trapped inside of you that you don't know how to get rid of.
When I was writing about Jessica and her accident, I did not want to write about it. It was so painful. I did not want to think about it. I did not want to write about it. When I started writing, I could not stop. And it was amazing. And then when I was done, I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you, Summer, for doing this, because you really needed it. And when I started writing about rape, same thing. I was like, I do not want to put this pen on this paper. My Reiki master said, you have not released this, my friend. You've got to write about it. I'm like, no. Any other advice? Because I'll take that advice, not this.
Anything else,
probably a
please.
bad idea. I got to go.
I don't like
time
you
is
very
it?
much.
I got to go. I got to pick somebody up.
Can I have a refund?
Yeah. So what you mean by that is...
That just...
Yeah, I'll say, sure, yeah, I can do that. And
What
then
else?
inside I'm like, fuck you, bitch. So...
We love you, Cassie.
And then, so then, days go by and I'm like, for crying in the night, I gotta do this.
Crying. I've never heard that.
Sorry,
I love
I was channeling my inner Mormon self. So,
I fucking love that.
so when I did put pen to paper, then I was like, it was just all coming out. It was flowing out of me like lightning. And then when I was done, I was like, oh my God, yeah, holy crap. I needed that.
Yeah.
I feel sometimes, this is a silly metaphor, but I'm going to use it anyway because it's how I feel. I feel like a medicine woman with little bags of healing, like...
I like a little bag.
little bags all over my belt of things like little magical bits of experience and knowledge.
We got lots of experience.
Yeah, I got a lot of bags. And that I can take these experiences out and help other people heal. Like, I feel like I'm, I have all of these resources because of my own experience and my own healing and my own trauma and, journey that I can draw from and I can help other people because I've been there.
Look what I got in my bag.
Come here, look in this bag.
You'll like it.
It will help you. I absolutely know that we'll be sharing our story again.
Over and over
times.
and over again. Yes.
So it feels magical to be here right now sharing it for the first time in this space that we've created to share with other women and have them share with us. I'm just feeling like rainbows and lollipops right now.
And you look like rainbows and lollipops.
Yeah, it's true.
I know. No, I know that you're going to touch so many women and the story is going to resonate with them. There's some piece that they're going to take and they're going to implement today. And because of your bravery of coming out and talking about your story, that their life will be changed forever. That's what we're doing. That's what we want to do. That's why we step out and we're vulnerable and we just open ourselves up, because we want to be that for somebody, to give them hope. And I love it. I love, love, love that you told your story today.
Thank you. Thank you for holding space for me. It was so beautiful and perfect.
Love you.
I love you too. I want to hug you, but we had these microphones.
They're in the way.
Let's just cheers.
Here, kiss.
Okay.
We didn't kiss.
Okay. Oh, that was amazing.
Follow Instagram.
Follow us.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook.